He walked in just after sunrise. Wrinkled jacket, quiet eyes. All he asked for was a booth by the window and a black coffee. The waitress looked him over once, then said flatly, "We're not serving today."
No explanation. No apology.
The place wasn't full, but somehow there was no room for him. She didn't know who he was, but 20 Marines did, and the next morning, they showed up without a word and didn't leave a single table empty. If you believe some people deserve more than just a seat, they deserve to be remembered. Share this story, and subscribe to Endless Stories, where quiet loyalty always finds its voice. It was just past 6:30 a.m. when he pushed open the diner door. That kind of chill in the air where the sun hasn't warmed the concrete yet and the neon open sign buzzes louder than the radio inside. His boots were worn smooth, laces mismatched, and his jacket hung a little loose on his shoulders like it once fit tighter when he was 20 pounds heavier and 30 years younger. His name was Samuel Boone. Most people called him nothing because most people never asked. He didn't look like trouble. Didn't look like anyone, really. Just a quiet man with silver hair slicked back from the wind, a canvas duffel bag on his shoulder, and eyes that scanned the room not out of habit, but because scanning rooms used to save lives. He walked in alone, as he did every Thursday since winter turned to spring, slid into the corner booth next to the window, the one facing the sunrise, the one no one else ever wanted because it was too close to the draft. It was his booth. Not officially, but it was where he sat to drink his coffee in silence and watch the town pretend it didn't forget him. The place wasn't full. 3 customers, 2 staff, the smell of bacon that had burned slightly on the griddle. Country music low on the speakers, not loud enough to annoy, not soft enough to ignore. He waited. No menu.
No greeting.
Just the scrape of chairs and the sound of a waitress chewing gum behind the counter, wiping down a coffee pot like it had personally offended her. She glanced over, then walked toward him. Not with a notepad, not with a smile, but with a stare that had already decided something. "Sorry," she said flatly. "We're not serving dine-in today." He looked up, confused but calm. "I've been coming every week," he said. "Same booth." She shrugged. "Not today." He didn't argue, didn't raise his voice, just nodded once like a soldier told the mission changed and orders were orders. He slid out of the booth slowly, bone stiff, picked up his bag, and turned to leave. Behind him, the 2 young guys in hoodies chuckled softly into their pancakes. One of them muttered, "Maybe next time try a shower first, old man." He heard it. Of course he did. But he didn't stop walking. Samuel Boone had marched through jungles and deserts. He'd carried brothers who never came home. And now, at a time in his life when he should have been saluted, he was being asked to leave a diner half empty. He didn't say a word, but someone else would. He didn't make it 3 steps from the door before the second cut came. Not sharp, not shouted, just tossed out like trash no one thought twice about. "Hey," said one of the boys by the window, fork halfway to his mouth. "Ain't this the guy that sleeps behind the hardware store?" His friend laughed, too loud for the small room. "Yeah, I seen him dig out a trash can last week. Thought he was some nut job. Turns out he just likes bad coffee." The waitress didn't stop them. She didn't even flinch, just kept pouring cream into a mug at the counter like none of it was hers to manage. Samuel didn't turn around. He could have. He could have said the words that might have shut them down cold. Names, ranks, years of service that none of them could spell, much less survive. But he'd learned long ago that silence, real silence, makes the right people uncomfortable, and the wrong people louder. He reached the door, pushed it open, and stepped back into the wind. It wasn't cold, but something in it stung. The way it does when you've been told you don't belong, not with anger, but with indifference. Behind him, the bell on the door jingled once as it closed, sealing him out like a problem solved. Inside, the laughter continued. Not cruel, just casual. The most dangerous kind, because it came from the belief that nothing would ever come of it. Just a weird old man and his busted boots, gone before the bacon got cold. But they hadn't noticed the man in the leather jacket sitting 2 stools down from the register, sipping black coffee, eyes hidden beneath a ball cap stitched with 3 rows of battle ribbon pins. He hadn't looked up once since Samuel walked in. But now he was looking straight at the waitress, and she finally looked uneasy, because she knew what that stare meant. She might not know his name, but she knew he wasn't just another old man. He was watching, listening, and he wasn't going to laugh. He hadn't moved since Samuel walked in, just sat there with both hands wrapped around a chipped ceramic mug, steam rising into the brim of his ball cap. The kind you only get if you've earned something no one can take back. He looked like any other old-timer. Denim jacket, boots still muddy from a ride, the faint smell of engine oil clinging to the sleeve. But the way he watched the waitress when she turned Samuel away, it wasn't casual. It was studied, measured, like a man used to reading people before they spoke. He didn't speak, not yet, but his fingers tapped once on the counter, index, then middle, like an old cadence call only a few would recognize. The waitress caught it. She glanced at him, eyes darting to the pins on his cap, then away again, as if hoping he'd finish his coffee and leave like nothing had happened. But he didn't. 2 booths over, a mother in scrubs paused mid-bite, staring out the window as the old man with the duffel disappeared around the corner. She shifted in her seat. Maybe it was the way he didn't argue, didn't ask why. Or maybe it was because her dad used to walk just like that after chemo. Slow, quiet, head down, but proud in a way that made your throat tighten. She reached for her phone, not to film, not to text, just held it like instinct told her something had just happened, and she might need to remember it later. At the far end of the diner, the cook stood behind the pass, arms crossed, spatula motionless over the grill. Big guy, tattoos up both arms. Former Marine. Everyone knew. He didn't like drama, didn't care for noise, but he'd been watching too. Watched the waitress make the call. Watched the boys laugh. Watched the man walk out without saying a word. And now, as grease crackled in the pan, he muttered something under his breath. Too soft to hear, but just loud enough for the waitress to freeze as she passed. "You messed up," he said. She turned. "Excuse me?" He didn't look at her, just flipped a pancake. "You heard me." The air shifted. Nothing big, just a tension you feel behind your teeth. The kind of quiet where you know something's coming. Not a fight, not a shout, just something that doesn't get undone. Out front, a black pickup pulled into the far corner of the lot. The kind with base decals in the rear window. The kind you don't notice unless you've worn boots long enough to know who drives what. The engine cut. The door stayed closed. But someone inside was waiting, and they'd seen everything. The first thing he did was stand up. The man in the ball cap, still holding that now lukewarm coffee, rose slow, deliberate, the kind of movement that isn't meant to threaten, but also isn't meant to be ignored. He left a 5 on the counter. Didn't touch the tip jar. Didn't say goodbye. Just looked at the waitress with an expression that didn't need words to explain. She opened her mouth to say something. Maybe to smooth it over, maybe to defend herself. But he was already walking out the door, pushing it open so hard the bell above jumped on its hook and let out a sound that cut through the entire diner. The door shut behind him with a finality the room hadn't earned. The cook leaned out from the kitchen pass, eyes narrowing. "That who I think it was?" The waitress shrugged, defensive. "Just some old vet, like the other one." The cook stared. "That ain't just some vet. That's Sergeant Lou Riggins, 1st Recon Battalion, Iraq 03. The man trained half the Marines on this coast." The waitress blinked. "How do you?" "Because I served under him." The cook cut in, eyes now burning. "And I wouldn't have made it home if it wasn't for him." She looked down at her shoes, but the room was already shifting. At the table near the window, the 2 young guys who had laughed earlier suddenly found their pancakes less interesting. One of them whispered, "You think they're coming back?" His buddy scoffed, tried to shake it off, but his leg bounced under the table. Outside, the black pickup hadn't moved, but the window rolled down. Inside sat a man in his 40s, sunglasses on, Marine Corps decal on his dashboard, and a phone pressed to his ear. He wasn't smiling, just nodding slowly as he spoke into the receiver. "Yeah, it's confirmed. Same guy, Boone, diner on Chestnut. Disrespect. Public." Pause. Then, he didn't push back. Walked out quiet. Another pause. Yeah, I'll send the location. We're not letting this one slide. He hung up, didn't look back at the diner, just started scrolling his contacts. And for the first time in 10 years, the Marines weren't rallying for a war. They were rallying for breakfast. And one of their own had just been told he didn't belong. The phone call reached Camp Weiler just after 7:15. It didn't go through official channels. It didn't need to. A corporal in admin passed the message to a gunnery sergeant in the motor pool, who handed it to a captain in civilian clothes finishing his morning run. The name said everything. Samuel Boone, former Staff Sergeant, 3rd Battalion, 7th Marines. Fallujah, Helmand, 9 tours, Silver Star, 2 Purple Hearts. Status, homeless. Last known address, nowhere. Current location, refused service at a diner off Chestnut Avenue. The response wasn't loud, wasn't organized, but it was instant. Word rippled out across Marine circles like a memory being reawakened. Men who hadn't worn a uniform in 10 years sat up straighter. A mechanic on base threw down his wrench, peeled off his gloves and said, "Boone? Boone's still alive." A lieutenant colonel stopped typing mid-email, eyes frozen on the name. He'd once seen Boone drag a bleeding private across 2 football fields of open ground while under RPG fire, patch his chest with a ripped sleeve, then crawl back for the next man without saying a word.
No speeches. No game plans.
Just action. Just Boone. And now he was being turned away from a half-empty diner like his years had never happened. It wasn't going to stand. Back at the diner, no one knew what was coming. The waitress had gone back to wiping menus. The boys by the window paid and left without finishing their food. The mother in scrubs tipped double and whispered to the cook. He didn't deserve that. But the cook was already on his phone. Not to complain. Not to gossip. Just one text. For words. He's still Boone. Chestnut. Outside, the black pickup finally pulled away. But not far. Just enough to make room. Because more were coming. Not with signs. Not with guns. Just boots. Old boots. New boots. Boots that had stood in sand and mud and blood and now pavement. They weren't coming to protest. They weren't coming to fight. They were coming to sit. Because if a place had no room for Samuel Boone, then maybe it wasn't a place worth eating at in the first place. They didn't come all at once. That would have made it too easy to dismiss. No, they came like memory, slow at first, then all at once. The first man showed up just after 8 a.m. Civilian jeans.
Faded Marine Corroudi.
Clean-shaven, but the way he parked straight, backed in perfectly, and scanned the sidewalk before stepping out, you could tell. He didn't look around when he walked in. Didn't say a word to the waitress. Just sat in the same corner booth Samuel Boone had been turned away from, laid a folded bill on the table, and stared straight ahead. 10 minutes later, another truck. This one with a bumper sticker that read Semper Fi Oi Afghanistan Vet. A younger guy stepped out, maybe mid-30s, tight buzz cut, sleeve tattoo creeping out under his jacket. He held the door open for the first man who had just stepped outside to light a cigarette. They nodded.
No handshake.
Just recognition. Inside the diner, the waitress started to notice it. The way the room changed shape without a single word being spoken. Booths that had sat empty for weeks now filled with men who didn't touch menus, didn't ask for specials, didn't talk loud. They just sat. Ordered black coffee, sat some more, and waited. By 8:45, 6 tables were taken, all occupied by men who shared nothing in appearance but everything in bearing. Some young, some gray-haired, some wearing ball caps with faded units. Some with nothing but the look in their eyes to give it away. The cook stepped out of the kitchen, wiping his hands on a towel. "You feel that?" he asked Chris, the new kid working register. Chris nodded slowly, unsure what that was, but certain something had shifted. And then a woman walked in, early 40s, blazer over a navy blue turtleneck, walked like an officer, sat down at the counter, nodded toward the window and asked, "That where Boone sits?" The waitress said nothing. The woman said nothing back. She just pulled out a small notebook, placed it face down on the counter, and stared at her coffee without drinking it. Outside, 2 more SUVs parked at opposite ends of the lot. Their doors didn't open. They just sat there, like bookends holding a chapter open for whoever dared to read it. And suddenly, it wasn't a diner anymore. It was a formation, perimeter, a quiet message that said, "You may not know who he is, but we do. And now, so do you." By 9:15 a.m., there were no tables left. Not a single one. And not because of weekend rush or holiday crowds, but because every seat had been quietly, methodically, respectfully filled by men and women who didn't come to eat. They came to hold ground. Booths once empty now had Marines in them. Some active, some retired, some you couldn't quite tell. All sitting with coffee, most not even drinking it. Just being there. On purpose. One by one, they'd arrived.
No fanfare.
No signs. No orders. Just a ripple across a network that no one could see but everyone could feel. The waitress tried to carry on like normal, scribbling orders, refilling cups, avoiding eyes. But the tension was different now. Not hostile, just heavy. And then the cook did something no one expected. He walked out of the kitchen, apron still on, and placed a folded American flag on the counter. Nothing grand. No speech. Just hands that unfolded it halfway, laid it flat like it belonged there, and stepped back. The room went still. A young man in a bomber jacket stood up from the far end of the room and walked to the booth by the window. The one where Boone had been turned away. He didn't sit. He didn't speak. He pulled something from his pocket, a silver dog tag on a broken chain, and laid it gently on the table. Then he turned to the room, and for the first time that morning, someone spoke. "He saved my brother," the man said, voice steady. "Back in Helmand, my brother bled out on the evac bird. Boone kept him awake, held his hand, told him jokes. He looked at the waitress. My brother didn't make it, but the last thing he said was, 'Tell Boone thanks.'" Then he sat back down. The air didn't break. It deepened, like something sacred had entered without knocking. Someone at the counter began to clap. Slow, uncertain. But no one joined in. Not because they didn't agree, but because this wasn't that kind of moment. This wasn't about applause. It was about remembering. The waitress looked like she wanted to disappear. The manager, who had just walked in 10 minutes ago with his tie crooked and attitude loaded, looked around and froze. "What's going on?" he asked. The cook didn't look up. He just said, "A man was turned away yesterday." "Okay," the manager said. "So?" The cook stepped forward. He was Staff Sergeant Samuel Boone. The manager opened his mouth, about to fire back, but then saw the line forming outside. Men in uniform, women with service pins, a retired general stepping out of a black sedan, medals glinting in the sun, walking toward the diner with the posture of a man who's buried too many soldiers to stay quiet about one more insult. And suddenly, the diner didn't belong to its owners anymore. It belonged to something older, something earned. And for the first time since yesterday, there was a seat waiting by the window again. But Boone wasn't there to take it. It didn't happen overnight. It never does. Change like this never comes with parades or apologies screamed from rooftops. It starts with small things, quiet things, like how the waitress didn't show up for her shift the next day, or how the manager stopped wearing ties altogether and started greeting every customer like they might be someone he just hadn't learned to respect yet. The booth by the window, Boone's booth, was never used again. Not by regulars, not by staff, not even by tourists who didn't know the story. They'd walk in, eyes would drift toward that seat, and something unspoken would pull them elsewhere. The cook, who had never smiled at customers before, started bringing out free coffee to older men who ate alone, especially the quiet ones, especially the ones who looked like they'd seen more than they ever said. A woman from the VFW came by with a framed picture of Boone, the only one they had, taken during a 4th of July cookout 10 years back. He wasn't smiling, but Rex, his old service dog, was halfway up his lap, tongue out, eyes gleaming like he knew something the rest of them didn't. They placed the photo on the windowsill of the booth. No plaque, no fanfare, just the picture, and a single folded napkin with the words, "Reserved, Forever," written in black ink. The next week, A group of high schoolers from the ROTC program showed up. One brought flowers. Another read aloud the Medal of Valor citation that had Boone's name on it. The one that never made the papers, never got him on TV, just earned him a nod from the few who knew what those words meant. The diner staff started doing something unusual. Every morning at 6:30, before the first customer walked in, someone would brew a fresh cup of black coffee, walk it over to the booth by the window, and place it in front of the photo. They wouldn't drink it, wouldn't touch it. By noon, they'd quietly pour it out and do it again the next day. No one explained it. No one questioned it. It just became ritual. Down the street, the hardware store where Boone used to sit on cold mornings left a small bench out front with a brass plate that read, "Some came back, but never really left." And the people who used to cross the street when they saw him now crossed the lot to hold the door open for anyone who looked like they'd walked more miles than most could imagine. It wasn't about guilt, or image, or PR. It was about respect. Earned. Too late for some, but not too late for the town. Because once a place forgets its quiet heroes, it starts forgetting itself. He came back on a Tuesday. One of the boys from the booth, the one who laughed the loudest. His hair was shorter now. Hoodie traded for a button-up. No friends with him. No swagger. Just him. A paper cup of gas station coffee in one hand, and something small clenched tight in the other. He walked in without looking around. The diner was quiet. Not silent, just softer now, like even the spoons knew how to move quieter. He stepped toward the booth by the window, paused, and didn't sit. He just stood there, eyes fixed on the photo, lips pressed tight like there was too much behind them to risk opening. From his pocket, he pulled out a challenge coin. Scratched, faded, a cheap knockoff maybe, or maybe not. He placed it on the table next to the photo, beside the full cup of black coffee that no one ever touched. Then he pulled out a folded piece of paper. A note, handwritten, no signature, just 7 words in shaky block letters. "I didn't see you then. I do now." He left the paper face up, didn't say goodbye, just turned and walked out. Past the waitress who now worked morning shifts with her head a little lower and eyes a little softer. Past the new kid who had started last week and already knew not to touch the window booth. Past the cook, who didn't say anything, but nodded once as the door swung open. That night, they left the diner lights on longer than usual. No customers, just that one booth, bathed in quiet yellow light. Someone, no one knew who, taped the note to the window facing the street. By morning, people had started leaving small things under it. A folded flag pin, a set of worn dog tags on a string, a drawing from a 3rd grader that said, "Thank you, Mr. Boone," even though she'd never met him, and somehow, she had. Everyone had. In every town that forgot. In every restaurant that turned someone away. In every face that looked past a quiet man who'd once bled for people he'd never meet. They had met him. They just didn't know it. Not until now. And from that day forward, no one in that diner ever sat with their back to the door. Because Samuel Boone had always watched over them, even when they never saw him coming. No one really knew when Boone stopped coming. There wasn't a moment. No sirens, no headlines, no service held beneath folded flags. Just one Thursday, the booth by the window stayed empty. And the next, and the one after that. Some said he moved on. Others said he finally found peace, wherever men like him go when this world no longer fits. But what's strange is how much stayed behind. His coffee cup still got filled each morning at 6:30 sharp. Not a minute late. The photo stayed exactly where it had always been. No frame upgrade. No plaque. Just the quiet weight of memory pressed against glass. New customers learned fast. That booth wasn't up for grabs. Ask for it and the room would go still. Insist and someone would kindly but firmly ask if you were from around here. A question that meant more than geography. Outside, the sidewalk near the diner got a new patch of cement. No ribbon cutting, no mayor's speech. Just 3 words etched by hand before the concrete dried. Reserved. With honor. The locals walked a little slower past that corner now. Not out of guilt, they'd made peace with what happened, but out of something deeper. Something closer to reverence. Kids started asking who the man in the photo was. Some parents answered. Others just said, he was someone who sat still when the world moved too fast. The cook still worked the grill, though his voice had gone quieter. He didn't yell anymore, didn't have to. He knew that dignity had its own gravity now, and everyone in that place felt it. Even the mailman started stopping for coffee. He never used to. Sat alone, didn't speak, just nodded once toward the booth and took his first sip in silence. Because when someone like Boone leaves, he doesn't vanish. He settles into the air, into the walls, into the way people carry themselves when they think no one's watching. And maybe that's how it should be. No medals, no speeches, just one chair, facing the window, left untouched. Forever. If the story reminded you that some seats should never be taken lightly, share it. Not for clicks, not for views, but for the ones who never asked for applause, only a little space to be seen. Subscribe to Endless Stories, where the quiet ones are never forgotten.